Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Jenny Live. Hope you guys are having an amazing evening. Go ahead and join us in Miami TV. And as you know, drum roll, we are all excited because we're going to have our favorite person of the week, Brandon Wells, back with us to learn so much more about things that we don't know about, but he does. So I think, first of all, since we've been talking about Alaska so much, we're probably going to hit that to begin with. So let me put these little cute turquoise ear things on. Brandon, can you hear me? It's like...
I hear you fine.
Perfect. How are you?
I'm doing great, thank you. How are you doing?
Doing good. A lot of busy day. I know we were both running a little late today.
Yeah, an incredibly busy day, but you know how it goes. I mean, time is not as linear as we like to believe that it is.
True, but it's good to be busy. You know, if it's time, I think it's good to be busy. It's boring when you're not doing anything.
Well, yeah, because I mean, I know lots of people where whenever they have to sit still, they can't sit still for very long. It's like, excruciating for them, honestly speaking.
That's happened. Okay, I just went to Alaska, and you asked me how did I like the trip and would I go back, and I said I absolutely loved the views. It was a beautiful cruise. I definitely recommend it. Once in a lifetime. Would I take a plane there and stay in one of the towns? Probably not. They were really small, not too much to do. Although if you love nature, yes, it is one of those places where you probably want to camp out. Although there are some kind of scary stories coming about from the forest that I mentioned, that if you hear somebody say, help, you probably want to run away. And Brandon has something interesting to share with us. Tell me, what do you know about Alaska?
Okay, so this has been a while ago. I did like a podcast episode about the Alaska Triangle. So it's very similar to the Bermuda Triangle, except we're dealing with land. And it's like right there where Alaska basically kind of meets the Canada and kind of like almost where it's almost Siberia. And it's referred to as the Alaskan Triangle. And one of the things that they're talking about, similar to the Bermuda Triangle, is that the planes, they'll go down. It's a magnetic shift, magnetic pull. But then they also talk about the fact that there are more missing people, and we always hear about missing people all over the planet, but nonetheless more missing people in Alaska than anywhere else in the entire world per capita. And it deals with all sorts of things like rough terrain. We're talking about like incredible weather. We're talking about UFO sightings, Bigfoot sightings, you name it, any kind of strange, unusual, paranormal stuff that would basically deter anybody from actually venturing into has occurred in Alaska and in the Alaskan Triangle. And not to mention, there was also a plane, and this is back in the 1960s, I believe it was, where they had a senator, and he was actually on this plane, and he was supposed to be going through Alaska for some sort of campaign thing, and he was never seen nor heard from again. This is, like I said, in the 1960s. And it's very, very creepy, and not to mention it with all sorts of other stuff. I mean, it's an interestingly beautiful area from what I gather. And not to mention, you also have the whole situation where it's like dark for 6 months out of the year and light for 6 months out of the year. In other words, no sunshine part of it, and then the rest total pitch, totally bright, sunny weather.
40 or 50 days a year of sun. I was like, how could you live like that? But, I guess they make the best. So I definitely, since we talk about energy so much, I definitely did mention everywhere I go, I try to perceive. This one, I kind of didn't want to for some reason, but I did feel a little bit of a coldness, and not because of the weather. Yes, it was chilly, but it wasn't as cold as I expected. It was more like like there was life missing, if that makes sense. Like it was kind of like a dull, beautiful, beautiful sceneries, but it was
Right.
kind of a place without motivation, if that makes sense. And maybe it has to do something with the sun, because as we know, the sun is life.
Right.
Sunny places are fun places. That's why they say that people that live near the ocean, right, or in islands, are a lot happier than those that live up the mountains, I guess.
I've heard.
But I spoke to some locals and asked them about UFO sightings or Bigfoot. Actually, you mentioned Bigfoot, and it was,
Yes.
yes, a lot of Bigfoot sightings. People that have experience,
Right.
like their own experiences, that they said that they've seen it, and
Right.
not a lot of people stay there when it's full winter because it gets minus 20 or more. So it makes sense. What do you think about this? I got to this conclusion when we started doing the show on Monday that if our bodies are heat, right? Like we're
Right.
energy. It's like we're this boiling calder inside, right?
Right.
For some reason, I feel like we're not meant to be inhabiting these kind of locations. Like the cold weather isn't really meant for humans, and maybe there are other species there that need to be left alone. And I highly believe, if you've ever seen the movie The Fourth Kind, that was
Oh,
supposed to be a true story. I think 100%. Some people try to
yeah.
debunk it and say that it wasn't real, but I get it. You don't want that bad publicity. You're gonna get abducted if you go to parts of Alaska.
Right.
But I think that these are the prone places to actually have these kind of experiences where do UFOs usually go and where do they live? Because a lot of them aren't even extraterrestrials. They're inland, they're living inside of our planet, and it's just some
Yeah.
places that we haven't yet discovered yet, or they're just really not talked about much. Like, for example, even volcanoes, actually, places that people
Sure.
aren't supposed to be near, really. What do you think about that?
Yeah. Well, all right. So one of the things we were talking about the fourth kind, and I know which movie you're talking about, has Mila Jovovich in it, and basically it's more or less is a really kind of a reenactment. In other words, it shows the actors on like one screen, and on the other screen they're showing like the real people on the other, which I thought was really an interesting way to do it and everything. It is actually really scary where she talks about the fact that she was a psychiatrist and her patients started all having kind of very similar, living experiences, and especially dealing with an owl and everything else. And we'll get into the owl later, but the owl basically is significant of something that's basically trying to contact you from a different realm, shall we say. And that's like dealing with like Native American spirituality right there. But what's interesting about like Alaska and everything is the fact that I mean we've heard so many stories about like UFOs, being hidden here and here and there, based upon certain things like caverns or even in the ocean. I've heard that one. You've heard the whole Antarctica thing, I'm pretty sure. What's interesting is you're right. There are places where people normally wouldn't inhabit. They wouldn't, it's not suitable for people in general, and just basically on the temperatures and the climate and everything else, and all sorts of other factors. I mean, nobody is going to basically reside in a volcano, for instance, is a great example, or even with like within the ocean or something like that. There's stories about UFOs coming out of the ocean. It's interesting because the thing about it is a lot of us consider that UFOs are relatively new, as in the past like 70 or 80 years or something like that. The truth be told, they've been here the whole time, and we're just kind of now catching up. And we're also not considering the fact that they might go through different dimensions. And then there's always that, where, it's like, where do they come from and, whatever. We should start asking, why is it that, they show up in things like our history? Why do they show up in, cave paintings? Why do they show up in, older than our own traditions? And it's because those things have been around, or not, I don't want to say those things have been around, but they've been around for thousands and thousands of years, and probably even millions of years, and they're far more advanced than we could ever imagine. So the thing about it is, as far as where do UFOs, hang out, or where do aliens reside, I would say it's probably, this is just my personal opinion, it's probably in places, as you were saying, where, the less dense population would be. So, for instance, a lot of it might be like in the desert. For all we know, they might, be in the Grand Canyon or something. Or it might be places, like Alaska. Alaska would be suitable for it just because of the fact of, the less amount of inhabitants there. I don't think they're going to really inhabit, say, like New York City or something to that effect, where it's a humongously dense population area.
I don't think they want anything to do with us. I mean, the ones that do live here. I think the
Yeah.
ones that want to mess with us are the ones that are trying to invade or coming from other parts. But there are several spiritual groups that do say that once the planet becomes warm enough that we are going to be seeing inevitably a lot of these beings coming from within our planet because it's going to get too hot for them to even live in there, let's say. But these are of course speculations. We could just
Right.
talk about it and have fun with it. We'll never really know until it happens.
Right.
But that was really interesting. Thank you for teaching us that because I never heard before about an Alaskan triangle. In fact, I had
Yeah.
no idea. Why didn't you tell me that before I went? I could have disappeared.
I, well, number one, I didn't think for a minute you would disappear. I guess you could say I have total and complete trust in your judgment and everything. So I know you would probably be like, wait a second, something's wrong here. I'm not going to go into this area here. And the other thing is, I mean, Alaska is a beautiful state, and I mean, I would personally would like to go there myself. And so I didn't want to just say, hey, Jenny, don't go to this because number one, it was your birthday. Number two, I mean, I wouldn't want somebody to deter me from going because I'd want to go myself.
And I'm going to repeat, I highly recommend it. It was just all scenery. That's why you do the cruise. I don't like most of the people there would tell you nobody flies in. Nobody really stays there. That's why it's 100% cruise related tourism. So
Right.
it's like you have enough cold, right, and enough scenery to be like, oh, this is pretty. Okay, let's go back in the ship and then enjoy it from the inside where it's warm. But it's definitely that once in a lifetime. And I've actually ran into a lot of people in the cruise that it was their fourth cruise to Alaska. A lot of people
What?
say that it's their
Okay.
favorite cruise to make. So, the timing, it's about a week. And again, the sceneries, I don't think you're going to get anywhere else. We didn't get to see a lot of glaciers, but it was nice. At least we got nice weather. All
Yeah,
right,
I
Brandon,
was happy.
thank you so much for that. Anything else you want to add about Alaska before we move on to the next topic that we had?
Well, nothing at the moment that I can think of, but I mean, if I come across something, I'll let you know and everything. But right now, I mean, that's all I can think of to add about Alaska at the moment.
Stay tuned for that. That's interesting. Okay, you wanted to talk about Dr. Edgar Mitchell. Who's Edgar
Yeah.
Mitchell?
All right. So Dr. Edgar Mitchell, and it's crazy to think how long ago this was. This was in 1971, and he
Okay.
was he was an astronaut, and he flew on the Apollo missions, and he was the sixth man to ever walk on the face of the moon, which is really, to say the least, historic within itself. This guy was incredibly educated. He went to MIT. He
The
was an
real thing
astrophysicist. Yeah,
or
yeah.
the
He was.
acted moon?
Well, all right. So let me phrase this: the real thing, supposedly, but nonetheless, I mean, he was deeply questionable about a lot of things, and one of the things he did question was the direction that NASA was wanting to take and everything. And we'll get into that in just a second. But as I said before, he went to MIT. He was an astrophysicist, etc. And he said that whenever he was in space, that he had what is referred to as a Kundalini spiritual awakening. And so what that basically, he was on, the moon and then going back to Earth. And he said he looked at the planets and the stars and everything else. And he said it was just something that lifted up within him. And it was just so profound that it really changed and altered the course of his life. And it wasn't just him that had it. He said it was all of his fellow astronauts that were on board with him. And after they came back down, about a year later, all of them full blown left NASA for multiple different reasons. They basically said that NASA was very mechanical and very tunnel visioned in their direction. And one of the things that Dr. Edgar Mitchell set up was something called IONS, which stands for the Institute of Nomadic Sciences. Basically, it's the idea of bridging science and spirituality as being one. Now, think about it. That's very profound, especially in 1971. For the longest time, and in many cases, is still a very huge gap between the spiritual community and the scientific community. And he basically said they should be one and the same. They should not be this argumentative, like almost like a left-right paradigm in a lot of ways. And that's what he did is he put this organization together that's still very much in existence even after his death in 2016. What's interesting about this particular organization, they investigate everything from paranormal and UFO sightings because he became also a UFOologist amongst other things. He did say he had some experiences up in space, and a lot of astronauts in general, whenever they're working for NASA, they find it very, very difficult to talk about, seeing aliens or seeing UFOs because of, shall we say, NASA's strings pulling. In other words, they're kind of perpetuating their narrative, and it becomes a very hard thing. They almost become like in the area of like whistleblowers that we talked about before. And so what was interesting about him, aside from him being
Why
so...
did you say Kundalini experience?
All right, so Kundalini basically means kind of like a rise in consciousness, and that's how he actually, believe it or not, worded it. Whenever I was looking up some stuff about him, he was being interviewed about a magazine that was kind of like a newsletter magazine or whatever, but that was from India. And they talked about that because, Buddhism derived from Hinduism, essentially speaking. The Buddha was a Hindu, similar to the way that Yeshua, otherwise known as Jesus, was supposedly a Jew. So it's very interesting where he talked about that, where it's like a rise in consciousness. This deals with the idea of like rising in your chakras, where you're dealing with, your root chakra, and then you're dealing with your other chakras that, go forth. And it becomes almost this like big breath, and, you just feel very euphoric, to say the least. And as he said, that's how, he literally felt. He said he has no other way of describing the scope and the magnitude of what he experienced just simply looking at the stars and looking at the earth and everything else. And he said it makes you, it's like one of the most humbling experiences that he had ever had. And he literally wrote about it in his memoirs, which I read basically about 3 years ago.
Okay, wow, amazing. Yeah, it's where me in an ordinary way, we say sexual energy, but that word, I
Right.
feel like it's like, bad to my ears already. Like, like I think that's a word that humans created, but it's really just creation, right?
It is. And sexual energy fits right into all this.
I think for me, that's the phrase that, ooh, what is happening? For me, I feel like
Right.
that's a phrase that people can understand easier, without actually going so deeply into, because we understand it. We say Kundalini, we know exactly what we're talking about. But most people
Sure.
that have never heard of anything like this, it's like, what? And then you say sexual energy, you're like, okay, sexuality and energy makes sense. Put
Yeah.
the two together.
Yeah.
So interesting. I've never heard of that before. I think that's amazing. Is this institute still open?
It is very much open. Matter of fact, they have like tours. They have all sorts of like events that are occurring.
Oh,
They
no
have, I
way.
mean, yeah, wait, and
We
it's
need to
it's
go.
crazy. Yeah, really. I mean, I'm serious. I mean, I actually, believe it or not, they have a thing where you can actually become a member. And I literally became a member, yesterday, and I'm like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. I mean, I'm like a little kid, like wanting to go to space camp.
So is
You know,
1971, is he still alive?
he has passed away in 2016 at the age of 85.
Okay, so who's maintaining the place now? I guess he left
Uh,
teachings?
He did. Well, he left lots of teachings, and as I said before, what they do is, amongst other things, they investigate things like, all right, so if somebody's doing meditation or if somebody's doing yoga, they're testing to see like what their brain functions look like in the course of meditation or in the course of yoga, and then they're reporting upon it. They're also testing things like telekinesis, telepathy, very very similar stuff, almost very almost like neck and neck with an organization that's actually here in North Carolina. It's in Duke University called the Ryan's Research Center of Paranormal Psychology and Investigations. That's been around since the early 1900s, like 1920, I believe it was. So
Wow.
there are all of these organizations that actually are truly interested in this stuff, and they're fascinated by it, and they're truly investigating it legitimately. They're not like, making like jokes or puns about it. I mean, they're dead serious about looking.
So where is this located?
All right, so the Ions is actually located, and I believe it is in California. And I'm
Okay.
trying to remember which part of California. I think they said San Diego somewhere. So
I'm not
it's in
kidding, actually. I think we need to pay a visit.
I I tell you what, I mean, whenever we figure like an itinerary and all sorts of time frames, let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's go to these
Let's we
and
have a
like
date. No
yeah, I mean,
joke,
just like we're
guys. Let's do this. And I think, have they ever studied someone that practices like sexual energy that you've heard of?
I not to well, let me phrase this. Not to my knowledge, and I said not to my knowledge. Okay, there's a lot of things that I will say. Everybody has limits to their knowledge. My personal opinion is that there definitely needs to be a study, and we're talking like kind of very similar to like meditation and yoga, dealing with like your brain and everything else and how that functions. I think that they should really take a look and see how somebody dealing with sexual energy. So if somebody's doing using their sexual energy to say be artistic or creative. Look how that actually works. Or if they're using their sexual energy, to do maybe like tantra sex, see how that actually works, and see what kind of how the brain works and things like that. Not to mention see like what
Yeah.
kind of dopamine they're receiving based upon that.
It would be really interested. I know I heard a couple years back. I don't remember where I read this. It was when we used to do Jenny Lives, where I used to like read interesting or strange news. And I remember in one of them, there was a couple that practiced Tantra that they got like, those things put to their brains and stuff. And the woman was
Really?
able to have, I don't know, I think like 50 orgasms, and that they were
What?
measuring the peaks of the energy actually exhaling from the body.
Really?
And I don't know if there was like a record Guinness or something like that, but I thought it was really interesting. And I was like, oh, we need to do this one day.
Yeah, I'm totally looking. I mean, and I'm totally up for that because it's like, that's one of the things that I mean, I really want there to be more of a study of, where
Yeah.
obviously this that. And it's like, we talked about like, how do we use our sexual energy? So for instance, all right, here's a good example. A lot of people don't know about this. There's a singer named Lenny Kravitz, and he's a musician and everything else. And he was talking about this in an interview. He said he's been celibate for 9 years, and he's using his sexual energy to become more artistic and more creative with his what he does. And I'm thinking to myself, 9 years, that's impressive. I mean, to be celibate for that long, especially being a rock.
Did you ever hear about Arnold Schwarzenegger? Was it Arnold? Yeah, Arnold saying that I saw a video of him saying maybe back when he was in his 20s, and they asked him
Right.
about his sexuality, and he said, "Oh, I have orgasms all day. Like I go to the gym and I'm coming." Did you ever see that video?
No, I have not. That's a no one on me. To be honest with you, I've not seen that. I think I would remember
I gotta
now.
find it and show it to you guys because I'm like,
Please.
I mean, this guy, when you see even the Netflix documentary that they did about him, I mean, he's all about putting your mind and your energy towards what you want and getting results with it.
Right.
So it all starts with your creativeness, and it's just the misinformation of people and immediately just thinking that because it comes from down there, it's perverted, and it's actually nothing like that. It's if we can start
Well,
thinking of our body as just holy altogether and in a holy way, right? And not in a carnal way, then
well, I
change. And
think I
how
think what
great would it be if we can start getting some studies on it? Like,
I think it'd be
imagine
great.
changing sexuality for the whole world.
I think it would be a wonderful thing. I mean, this kind of actually goes back to one of the reasons that you promote nudity, because one of the things is that nudity, sadly, especially like in the Western culture, has gotten associated deeply with things like pornography or things that are of lower vibration, lower frequency. So the next thing here's all this shame that comes in where in reference to nudity. It's no different than whenever they made alcohol taboo, and the next thing you have things like prohibition and organized crime. And incidentally, pornography is directly connected to organized crime, lower vibration frequency. But if we get to a society where, the idea of nudity, or for that matter, even sexuality, is not so much shameful, but just more, and I'm not saying, it's just not so much shameful that it's like downgrade going, you should never be this, you should never this. And a lot of times that goes back to like, how, society has been based upon manipulation, based upon, organized religion putting their hand in saying this right here is shameful. The thing about it is we're all born naked, and it's not like we can't figure out, hey, this person has this part of their anatomy that somebody else doesn't. It's not like we can't figure that out, putting two and two together. So the idea of sexuality or the idea of nudity is divine because we are all divine. And this kind of goes into, divine feminine and divine masculine. It takes both in order to really truly reach that divine state of union.
It's beautiful. That was beautiful. Yeah, it takes two. And I think that's, let's think of it like this. Like if we were to think, right, not speaking religion, but like let's call it the devil, okay? If we were to think
Sure.
what would be the best way for negative energy to infiltrate itself into each other's worlds and into our planet so that it destroys the powers that we have. And it would
Right.
just be making sure that we see what makes us powerful in an opposite way. So in this case, we're seeing sex as something perverted, as something
Right.
pornographic. We're utilizing it as something, carnal, and that's how it's been sold, even through the music industry. Speaking of the music
Oh, yeah.
industry, all this movement is happening, but it's for a
Oh, yeah.
reason. Like the more that you think deprivated about these subjects, the lower vibration you're going to have. So nothing is going to be popular in today's age if it's beneficial for you. Unfortunately, that is the kind of world that we're living in because the forces that are in charge of the planet right now are not good ones. So there we have the little bit, right, the 1% or the 2%, which is all of us, that are kind of fighting to make sure that we get back to our origins, right? And we change the way that we see our bodies and we change the way that we use our bodies, which they're really just vessels of energy, and use them spiritually, use them as rituals like even the tribes would do. We have some, well, did you want to comment something on that? And then I'm going to read some comments.
No, no. I mean, I'm just, I'm in agreement with you because what I've seen as far as the society is so much damage done by things like pornography, mentality, and basically how messed up it's like ruined relationships and things like that. But it's taken the divine energy away from it, and so all that we're like forced to look at is just the avatar version and not like the energetic version of it. That makes
In today's world, we have to be more aware of, wait, the mass population or the news or the people that are in charge are telling you this is bad. Okay, then it's probably the opposite. Not in everything, but
Yeah, yeah.
Your lives are perfect to listen to while working. Thanks for the great streams, Jenny. Amazing. I'm so happy. I'm so happy that the it came out also because I know a lot of you do just listen to it. So I also, of course, want to thank Brandon for all the interesting information. Jenny, it's always interesting listening. And can we go up a little bit with the comments to your guests, right? He's the best. Good evening. Look amazing. Thank you. Do we have any comments about tonight's show? Let's see. I know you guys are saying hello. No? Nice hair. Thank you. Saludos, Uruguay. So there's my mom actually. My phone's crazy. My mom sent me something today that apparently Joe Dispenza has also opened a school. I didn't know about this. It's called Ramtha's School of Enlightenment, and it's actually for people that have like gifts and to guide them with their mental powers. Have you heard about that?
I have actually. I've been following Joe Dispenza. Matter of fact, I was actually trying to watch a 2 hour lecture of his the other night before I went to bed. Sadly, I did not get to finish. I was like maybe 45 minutes into it. But he's doing a lot of groundbreaking work, honestly speaking. I mean, he really dives deep into the psyche of the human mind and the functionality and everything else about how it works. And I mean, what he's doing is absolutely cutting edge, but he's also like, working with a lot of esteemed scientists as well. People that are on the Gaia channel. And if anybody doesn't know what Gaia channel is, they need to look into it and possibly, similar to Miami TV, get a subscription to it. It goes right into a lot of what Jenny talks about on here, and it's amazing. But he actually has several series on Gaia, and he also has people on there like Billy Carson's on there, people like that, and he talks about everything from quantum physics to how the mind works and whatever. But what Dr. Joe Dispenza gets is he gets people out of their thought process. He kind of breaks it down and saying this is what's happening in your brain. This is what's how it's affecting your body. This is how it's so it's a domino effect. He illustrates wonderfully how everything in the mind and how everything that we do is affected by something.
And he's also a great example of it with what happened in his life. So at the end of the day, the mind is everything, right? Once we get to control it, you basically have control of your life. Like you're taking the reins, right? And you're doing with it what you want. Let's
Right,
see, we have
exactly.
a comment here. I'm UFOs neutral or negative for human development?
Well, how should I put this? Number one, I guess it first and foremost depends upon somebody's viewpoint about UFOs or even aliens. And, if some people are frightened of them, they shouldn't be. And that kind of goes into programming and how they've been programmed personally, or maybe, they've had an experience of some kind. And if they've had an experience of some kind, then that goes into a whole nother level of things. But if they haven't, if they're just afraid of quite frankly, the very notion of it, then as I said before, that goes into programming, and then find out that they've been watching a lot of movies where aliens are coming down to take us over and all sorts of other stuff. And I'm not saying that there aren't aliens out there that might have ill will towards mankind, just like there are people out there who also have ill will towards mankind. So we always have to kind of like balance that out and saying, it's not going to be all of them, because that would be absurd for them to behave like that, any more than it's absurd for all of us to behave in the same exact manner as well.
I always say there's two forces in the universe, positive and negative. So just like
Right.
there's, people that can become negative, and I mean, we're all born positive. Same with aliens, right? There's ones that want to give us technology and want our advancement, and
Right.
others just want to conquer, basically, because there are species out there that are just like animals, that they don't necessarily have the energy that we have or the souls that we have, and they don't see bad or bad or good. They just see instinct of survival,
Right.
just like the movies, like Predator.
Yeah, well, I
So
mean,
yeah,
there was the Predator versus Alien, where it was like the enemy of my enemy is my friend type of thing. But it's always very very interesting whenever you look at how aliens have been depicted in, quite frankly, many movies. Now, here's something interesting for you, Jenny. There's actually an organization, and I'm trying to remember if it's disclosure and something or another, but it's a form of disclosure. And what it is they're working in the film and entertainment business, and what they're wanting to do is they're wanting to have accurate portrayals of alien abduction or even alien and close encounter experiences and everything else, without making it to the point where the aliens are trying to take over the world, or where they're trying to kill us all or whatever. They're trying to get to a point where they don't make those kind of movies anymore, and I'm hoping that that really does happen, where we stop having all these movies about aliens killing people, because it's completely not true.
I'm gonna disagree with you, but that's the fun of it, right? I mean, how boring would it be
Yeah.
if we all thought the same? So I think that these movies do bring awareness of something that also could happen, because believe it or not,
Right.
as much as science fiction as it is, the things that you do see in the movies, like an actual
Yeah.
species just throwing a laser at you and making you evaporate, exists.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I'm not
um,
saying that that doesn't.
and
I mean,
they've been here. They're not here any longer, but they have been here.
right.
But I do understand, and I get your point, and I do agree with that, that it is
Yeah.
also, there hasn't been a lot of good movies about aliens. So we are kind
No,
of
no. There's
generalizing and
very
saying
good
they're all
garbage.
out here to, evoke us.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, it's not like they're all out to get us, but at the same time, there are some that are probably that do mean ill will, whatever, and maybe that's just they probably look at us similar to the way people look at animals in a zoo sometimes. You know what I mean?
Go up a little more. I think Jackie said if UFOs can, no, the other way. Can aliens control gravity? I don't think
Ooh,
gravity affects aliens at all, honestly. What do you think?
yeah. I don't see that that actually would be. Wow, I've never been asked that one before. I'm sorry. Um, yeah,
I think that's just for
yeah,
us. I don't know.
yeah. I can't imagine. Wow, that's a good question. I mean, I'm glad. I, I wish I would have thought of that
We're
one.
gonna have to
Jeez.
come back at you for that one, Jackie.
Yeah, yeah. I'm gonna start talking like Porky Pig. It'd be like, what in the world?
Well, in my opinion, I don't think aliens. I don't think it affects them at all. Their ships probably, yes,
Right.
but them as species or as beings, I don't think it affects them at all because they have the control of their energy, so they're able to be like a skinwalker. They're able to personalize themselves into a human body. They're able to jump dimensions. They're able to be invisible or have a body. So when you have that
Right.
kind of control with energy, gravity just doesn't really affect you at all. Here's a good example. When you leave your body or when we pass away, our soul isn't affected by gravity because
No.
gravity only affects a physical being. So maybe by them being physically here, they might be affected by gravity, but more than likely no, because they still have that strong mind to be able to control if they're invisible or not. So I think the
Yeah.
correct answer would be no. But then again, who knows? The first. The ley lines for the pyramids, they are all connected. The pyramids. What about writings of H.P. Lovecraft and the Dreamers, multidimensional beings? Have you ever heard of that, Brandon?
Like they always
For
had.
35 minutes. There you are. Okay, I got you. Have you heard about
Yeah,
that, the Lovecraft and the Dreamers?
I have actually, but I haven't looked into it enough. And so
I've never heard of it.
yeah, I'm trying to remember. And here's the weird part: you ever like like say, okay, I've seen this, I've heard it, or that name sounds familiar, and you're trying to scratch your head, going, who was it said it, or where did I read it from? Because you read and you hear so much, and you're like, whoa, hold on a minute, I know it from somewhere. And but to answer your question, yeah, I have heard that. Now you're gonna like make me go start looking into it and try to figure out where it is that I heard it from or how I heard it.
Get interesting questions. Thanks, guys. All right, everyone. God, we have more questions. Is the soul a quantum entity?
Ooh, I would say a harsh
For
yes.
me. That- Are we good? Or maybe they're just telling us to wrap it up.
I
You guys are
think we're
talking too
frozen.
much.
No, I think we're frozen. Sorry.
Okay, we're going to
Yeah.
keep that one for the next one. It's great to have questions, by the way. Thank you, everyone that's live, that's with us. And I love that you love these subjects as much as we do. So we're going to go ahead and write them down. And since the show has been over, we should have stopped 10 minutes ago. We just got carried away. We're going to keep those for next week. Brendan, you've been amazing. Thank you so much. And like always, go ahead and share with everyone your podcast so they can tune in to you.
It's called Revealing the Truth with Brandon Wells. I'm on Amazon and iHeartRadio and Spotify, amongst other platforms.
There you go. See you next week, Brandon. Thank you so much.
Jenny, it is always a pleasure and an honor. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it.
Kisses. All right, my loves. If you're watching us, we will continue tomorrow with another Jenny Live. And have an amazing evening. Thanks for watching. And don't forget, keep your comments and questions for the next Thursday. More questions for Brandon. He's very knowledgeable, and we all want to know more. So have an amazing evening. We're going to continue now for our members only in Miami TV. Kisses.
Thank you guys.